Welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to make their way into the creative industries. I'm Amelia Sciandra, and I'm here with my co-host, Dan Allen.
Hello, hello, hello. Bow,
hello,
bow, bow,
hello.
Bow. That's my excited sound effects because I've been away, sort of. My voice has sort of floated into the podcast like a ghost, only to disappear, doing some intros and stuff. But I'm excited to be back.
He's back, baby. And what a one to come back for. We are talking to documentary filmmaker Sonum Sumaria today. And I think she's going to have some just fascinating stuff for us to learn about. We've talked to maybe a couple of other documentarians, but it's certainly a field that maybe gets forgotten. Would you agree with that, Dan?
Yeah, for sure. I think certainly when people think about the craft of filmmaking, you know, if people say they're going to go to film school, it's assumed that that's probably for the world of fiction. I think possibly because the teams are a lot smaller. The teams, the crews are a lot smaller with documentaries, so maybe there's fewer people working in it. But the amount of non-fiction content that's released these days, it seems crazy that it's not talked about from a behind-the-scenes perspective as much.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you're right. It's like, if I think about even just my Netflix feed, I watch a ton of documentary. I love documentary. Yeah. I love that kind of content as well as fiction.
True crime? You're a true crime kind of
I do. I do
gal?
watch some true crime. I don't watch everything. There's very specific true crime that I like. But I'm into true crime. And
is this like a niche of true crime, like specifically ones that are secret murderers, or?
Maybe you're right. Maybe it is actually a niche. I like the ones where there's still a mystery, where they're telling the story, but something still hasn't been solved. So you are left at the end of the documentary going, oh, do I think X or Y happened?
Nice.
Or did he do it, or did she do it, or did nobody do it? Did they just disappear? Those kinds of things.
How do you confirm that that's the type of show it's going to be before you watch the episodes?
I don't. It's usually in the first episode that I discover either, oh, they know what happened here, or, oh, they don't.
Yeah, because there's normally like a heads up, isn't there? There's like a voiceover that's being like, and still to this day, we don't know.
Yes.
Or it's like, or they'll be like, the truth will shock you, like those TikToks.
I also really like documentaries about fringe religions. Like, I really like documentaries about cults, about...
Me too.
There's a really good one about this guy who basically scammed a bunch of Mormons, and he was a Mormon himself, and that one was really fascinating. And I actually think about it often. It was a very, very good documentary. So, yeah, I mean, I think documentary is such... I've been thinking a lot about, we all want to be storytellers, right? That's why we want to get into this business, because we love the idea of telling a story. And we might write a fiction film because we have a story in our mind that we've never seen before. But a documentary is a way to tell a story that's out there in the world that maybe hasn't just been told yet, rather than never before. And I think that's really cool, that there's... I think sometimes, certainly when I was young, I thought, oh, documentaries are boring. They're nonfiction. I don't want to do that. But actually, of course, now that I'm grown up, I see that's totally wrong. And real people are maybe even more interesting than the fictionalized ones we invent.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And to tell us all about that, we do have Sonum. So without any further ado,
let's do it.
Welcome to the podcast, Sonum. How's it going?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. A little bit nervous, but good.
Oh, no need to be nervous. Dan and I are the best, most chill podcast hosts I think you've ever met, or I hope.
That's true.
So start by, obviously you have a whole entire career, and there's no way you can sort of sum it up for us succinctly, but tell us a bit about your background and the kind of projects that you work on.
Sure. So I work on mainly independent films. So I'm working on one at the moment about a camel herding family in India. It's a long-term project. I've been doing it for the past 6 years.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, a long time. Definitely a labor of love. And then I also make films for NGOs or educational institutions, sometimes small businesses. Yeah.
Well, brilliant. Let's talk about that project you're working on right now, because I think it's great for our listeners, especially to understand why the life cycle of a project can last so long. So can you tell us a little bit about the inception of it in what I suppose 2017, and then sort of where you've gotten to over the past 6 years?
Yeah, sure. So I was so it's in Kutch in India. So my grandparents are from India.
Cool.
And I was there filming a project with my sister. We're filming a documentary that she was making about a fishing village. And as we were there, I saw this family of camel herders. They looked really beautiful. They had these amazing embroidered clothes, and they looked very exotic, kind of like from a legend. And I'd never seen like this kind of site before. And I was really intrigued, and I wanted to find out more about them. And I did a bit of research, and then I found out that their culture is actually like on the verge of disappearing. Wow. And I thought it was really, really tragic, and I wanted to do something that would help somehow.
Certainly.
Yeah. So then I kind of worked on a little pitch and got a bit of grant money. I went back to India, and then got in touch with an NGO who works with different pastoralist groups in the region, and met quite a few different families, and then got along with one of them the most. And the initial idea was to have the film done in 1 year, to film them over 3 different seasons, so we can get to know their way of life, which is so different. They're nomadic camel herders. And then just real life took over. So the story took a turn. Also in terms funding, I did a bit of crowdfunding, so that it kind of delayed the shoots. And then eventually, the story took a different turn. So it ended up being 5 years of filming.
Wow.
I finished filming last year. So I was going there about once a year to capture this family. And you can see this transition over this time period. They go from being nomadic camel herders to being settled labor workers. So it's really sad, their story.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now I'm at the stage where all the footage is finally all translated. We had 90 hours of footage that had to be translated from their language to Gujarati, then to English. So it took a really long time. And then now we're still looking for funding to do post. But in the meantime, when we don't have funding, I'm just doing everything, essentially.
What an incredible project. And I presume some of what took so long was impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, a little bit by the pandemic. So just kind of 1 year I wasn't able to go there. But mainly I think what impacted it the most is funding, funding and real life.
Sure. Yeah. And so, I think what's great that you just mentioned there in talking about how it changed was that you said the story changed. And I know that a lot of people tend to look at, and we do it naturally in the industry, that we talk about documentary filmmakers and fiction filmmakers. But of course, documentaries have stories just like fiction films have stories. So if you can, maybe not on this current film because you're still working on it, but maybe with an example of your another film, can you talk about that story and how it shifted or what ended up becoming the driving force of the story for you from a documentary perspective?
Okay, because this one's in my mind. Can I just talk about this film?
Please, yes.
Okay, yeah. So initially, the driving force was just, I didn't really because it's difficult to make up the story when you don't know what you're going to film. So I had a theme in mind. The theme was tradition versus modernization. In today's world, do we have space and opportunity for there to be nomadic communities like this, for them to continue living? Or is it inevitable that they will just gradually just disappear? So that was my initial question. That still is the question that I'm pursuing. But I just thought I'd film them over a year, see how they live, how different it is to us, and that was about it. And then obviously once you film them and meet them, and then you get to know the characters who are so they're so interesting, they're so complex, and they're just like us. Even though they look very exotic, all their conversations, they're just like what any one of us would talk about. So it's really beautiful to see that kind of juxtaposition. And then in terms of story, so with this film, the overall kind of arc happened naturally. So they kind of lost all their camels due to a disease, and then they went into working as laborers and kind of are now more into like urban life. So it's got like a natural narrative,
right?
Exactly. But then within that, there are other little story arcs with the characters. And so in the edit, when we do it, we're going to have to pick the most powerful stories and see how we can construct kind of a comprehensive film. So I think, you know, as we were talking about fiction before, so fiction, you often have the story beforehand, you know what it is. And then documentary often, especially if it's observational documentary, which is the style that I'm filming this film in, the story element normally comes in during the edit. So the edit's kind of a long process where you really hone in what the story is.
Could you define what observational documentary filmmaking means, or what it means to you? And so are there other sort of sub-brands or sub-branches of documentary filmmaking as well? And what do they look like, I wonder?
Yeah, sure. So observational filmmaking is basically when you don't interact with your participants too much. You just film their everyday life, what's going on. They're probably like, if it's like very pure observational film, there are no interviews. So it's kind of like fly on the wall. You're just there with your camera filming what's happening. And it's really kind of very slow. Often these kind of films are very slow, really immersive. You're completely just transported into their world. And then obviously you have different types of documentaries, films that can be more focused on history or interviews or kind of voiceovers. Sometimes, you know, you can also have what they called kind of when you film fiction, but it's retelling of the story.
Yeah, I know. When you get those on like true crime documentaries, and they do the recreations,
the reenactments, right?
Yeah, reenactments, yeah,
exactly.
And so, do you feel like when so you've got 90 hours of footage, which is what an enormous amount of footage, and that will be honed down into how long of a film are you hoping to be in the final? Is it a feature?
Yeah, so it's about 80 to 90 minutes, hopefully.
Okay, so that's a lot of it's a lot of cutting. It's a lot that ends up on the cutting room floor. What is the process like of taking such an enormous amount of content and then trying to, you know, you were talking about the story. Do you feel like the story reveals itself through the edit process, or have you got an idea and you're looking for certain things that feed that? How do you go about what seems like a monumental task?
And can I add on to that question as well? Just sort of like from a mind trying to keep track of everything perspective, are you just putting all 90 hours into the timeline and slowly working it down? Or do you have a good sense of what it is you've got and you just go and find those pieces and start to build that way?
So I've kind of, in terms of like the timeline, I've got them broken down into like days and mornings. So it'll be like day one morning, blah, blah, blah. And so I've basically made lots of notes. So gone through all the footage, made notes for certain, with time codes for themes or for certain moments I think are really powerful. And then so the thing is, so this is the first feature-length film that I'm going to edit by myself, unless hopefully we'll get an editor on board soon so we can do it together. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a learning process for me as well. So at the moment, it's kind of really thinking about what I want to say with the film. So going back to the core message, going back to who my main characters are, seeing their trajectory. And then obviously you can't fit everything in. So eventually, once I do the paper edit, I'll have to, be a bit ruthless. And also I think with these kind of documentaries, it's a lot of trial and error. You just have to try it out and see what works and what doesn't.
When you're filming a project like this, that's sort of this size as well, filming over a long period of time, is there a point or like a threshold you pass during filming where you're like, that's it, I've got enough to tell the story now, I've got the movie? Obviously you mentioned you're still looking for what that central plot could be in a way, so I suppose that's still up in the air, but a moment where you know you've got enough to tell a story even if you don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, definitely. To be fair, I think I could continue filming for 20 years and still think that I don't have enough. But no, I think especially in this film, the change that happened going from being nomadic to sedentary, that kind of in itself kind of told me, okay, now at least I've got a clear narrative, a complete change that I can craft the story around. And I think it depends on and also it's been like 6 years of my life, so I kind of want to wrap it up and move on to something else. Yeah. And also I want to show the family that I've been filming. I want to, show them the film and kind of get it out there.
I feel like they're going to find it too depressing to watch, aren't they? I don't know if I'd want to watch it.
But the thing is, it's so funny. It's really witty. Like, it's not a depressing film. Of course, okay, fine. Yeah, going from being nomadic to losing all your camels and everything. It is sad. But the thing about the characters, they're so funny that it's a real pleasure to watch. And you see all the joys and all the amazing lifestyle they have when they're nomadic. So I think it's going to be hopefully a pleasure to watch, even though I'll have a serious point and serious message as well.
What was the process like of approaching them and convincing them to welcome you into their life in a way, I suppose? And also, did you have to reconvince them over the years of letting you come back, or were they knew it was going to be exactly 5 years or whatnot?
Yeah, so an NGO introduced us, so that was a really nice way to get to know the family, because they already had a really good relationship with the NGO, so they trusted the NGO. It wasn't just a random person coming in saying, "Hi, can I film you?" Yeah. So luckily, because I was introduced in a helpful way, and then so I can't communicate to the family directly because I don't speak their language, which is a real shame. So I had an interpreter with me, and via the interpreter, kind of explained what I wanted to do, to make a film about their life, to showcase their life to the world, and also to kind of be a historic document for them. So maybe in the future, if their children or their children's children aren't nomadic, at least they can see how their ancestors used to live. So the father of the family, he was on board straight away. He said there was no problem. The mother was a bit more wary, so she took a bit more of convincing. So every time we went back, she would be asking, "Oh, why are you doing this?" And I had to explain again and again. And then it was in this last trip, or the second last trip, I can't remember, where she was explaining to someone else what we were doing. So I was like, "Oh, great. Now she's advocating the film and promoting it to her friends." That was good.
That's lovely.
You sort of touched on this, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what's the idea once the film is finished. How do you, what's your hopes for how it's distributed or shared with the world? And what you kind of hope people would get out of watching it?
So for these kind of documentaries, I think film festivals is the kind of ideal route to go down. So we're aiming for film festivals, and hopefully if it's successful there, then we'll have, hopefully TV channels or different broadcasters interested in it. And so what was the second part of the question?
What you hope audiences, even if they're at a film festival or they end up watching it on streaming, what you hope they'll get from it.
So also, sorry, I forgot to say that we are also in touch with the UN, who next year have, 2024, the UN has allocated this year to being the year of the camelids, which is the year of camels and all their related kind of cousins like alpacas and llamas. And they said that they would love to show the film to at various UN events.
Wow.
So that would be amazing. And so hopefully it'll kind of make a difference. And we also want to get the film to make an impact on the camel herders' lives. So in Kutch, so they're called pastoralists. So these are kind of shepherds who have animals and are nomadic. They are actually going to be really helpful to us, like globally, during the climate crisis, because they can move from place to place and produce milk and food for us. Whereas obviously if you're a traditional farmer, you can't pick up your land and move it to where there's going to be rain and ideal weather conditions. So part of this film is, one hope for the film is also to kind of persuade the Indian government to recognize pastoralists as a livelihood, pastoralism as a livelihood, which will then make it easier for them to have their own grazing land, but which is one of the obstacles that they're facing. So the film is kind of, hopefully will make an impact, like a tangible impact for the pastoralists. And also, I'd love for people who watch it to kind of question how our world is at the moment, and whether, you know, us living in cities and in urban areas in this modern world, whether our way of life is really better than nomadic people's, or like our ancestors' way of life, where they were really in touch with nature, and they had like a totally different way of thinking. It wasn't all about money.
Right.
It's more about relationships and about having fun and enjoying life. I'm kind of romanticizing it a bit because it's also a lot of hard work.
Of course.
You can't take a day off, a lot of walking, and it's difficult too. But just a question, how we live.
With it sounds like hopefully there could be this big positive effect as a result of this film coming out. And I noticed, obviously, you know, you've pointed your camera at lots of important issues. You made the film about homophobia in Moscow, amongst lots of other things. How do you decide what story you tell next? And do you have like an internal mechanism going on where you're thinking, oh, is this idea or is this issue or topic more important than this one? Do you see what I'm getting at? Do you have a sense of like, should I tell this story because it's more important, or is it more to do with something that you personally connect with?
That's a good question. I think it's often what I personally connect with, and because when you make a film, you're going to dedicate potentially 6 years of your life to it. So you've got to really have a strong passion for what you're telling, what story you're going to tell. And so there's so many important issues in the world, and I think everyone will have a certain issue that kind of resonates with them most. So for me, for example, I'm really passionate about stories about indigenous and nomadic peoples, or people like kind of who are kind of on the fringes of society somehow, and connected to nature, and just have a kind of a way of life that I think that I would love to have. So when it comes to picking a story that I'd like to tell, it happens kind of spontaneously, like where I am, who I meet, what things kind of spark my passion. Yeah.
So are you constantly looking for your next story, or do you wait for them to come to you? Is it things that sort of bubble up and are sort of in your field of view for an extended period of time, or is it something that, you know, it's sort of like an instant spark and you're like, I need to do that like now?
It depends. So I've got like a couple in my head that I'd love to make. So I'd love to make a film about the Romani Gypsy community, and also about an indigenous tribe in the Amazon. But because I don't know, I don't have like a particular in. It's like right. I haven't met the family or the person that I'd like to film. So it's kind of both. So eventually when I do meet that person, or when I do come in that situation, then it'll click. But I have lots of ideas in my head that I would love to do this, but it depends on circumstances as well.
And when you sort of discover what your next idea is, or you meet a family and they say, hey, we'd love to be filmed, or we wouldn't mind it. Do you, at what point in the process do you involve organizations like NGOs, like charities? How do you foment those partnerships in order to make your films happen?
So there's no like one set way. It could be that I'm in a new country. I'm in a country where I'd like to make a film, and then I can just go and inquire. I approach an NGO and ask them, do you know anyone like this? Or I'm interested in this. Do you have any advice where I could go, who I could speak to? So, I don't have a clear answer for that one. It just depends.
Do you feel like that's an integral part of the process for you? Like, have you ever not gone that route and sort of gone in just yourself trying to approach? And how is that experience different than perhaps the NGO approach?
Yeah, so the film that I made in Moscow, which is about xenophobia, racism, and like kind of migrant life in Moscow, so I was there for a different reason. I was teaching 2 children English in Moscow, and I was there for 1 year. And I thought, okay, I'm here for this period of time. I really want to make a film about xenophobia, because I could see, like, in my day-to-day kind of life, how Central Asian migrants were treated, how African people were treated in Moscow. And again, so I was like, oh, this is not fair. I want to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And then so I just met different people and started asking them questions and trying to do like research to find out what their lived experiences were in Moscow. And then eventually I met kind of 4 main characters who I resonated with and wanted it, and who were happy for me to film them. And then I just started filming. I didn't really have a clear idea of, again, what the story would be, but I knew the theme. Racism, xenophobia, kind of systemic corruption, and then just filmed everything, and again in the edit found the story.
Your style, you mentioned being observational documentary, so there's not, you have talking heads, but you don't necessarily have like a full-on, there's not like an interview, there's no discussions. Or do you avoid doing talking heads as well? I think I saw there was a couple of like, it's definitely the voices of the people that are sort of guiding the story, but are they from elsewhere?
Yeah, so the current film about the camel herders, that's observational, but my previous films have kind of been a mixture. So the Moscow one was a lot of talking heads, I think too much. So after I filmed it, like now looking back, I was like, oh man, I wish I had filmed it differently, but you always learn from all the projects that you make. Mm-hmm. So yeah, talking heads can be great, and even like a mixture. So this one I was very like, I just want to have observational. But now I think the next film I make, I'd like to do a mixture, kind of talk to the participants while I'm filming them, and kind of have that, because obviously interviews are great because then you can really get to know what they're thinking, and get a real solid insight. Whereas observational, you've got to be very patient, and then sometimes, things will come out during conversations, but not directly. So it's nice to have a mixture as well.
I see. So it's very much on like a project by project basis. You see it more as finding the right tools for the right story, rather than this is exactly how I make documentaries, so I'm going to do everyone like this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also I think it's also experimenting, because there's so many different ways to make a film. And the creative side of documentary, like there is like a big creative side of documentary. So you can always just mix and match and see what works. And, as you evolve as a filmmaker, you might then think, okay, I like this style best, or this is what my voice is. But in the meantime, you can always just see what works for you and experiment.
Were you a person who loved to and did a lot of traveling prior to becoming a documentary filmmaker, or were you a documentary filmmaker and therefore you traveled to find stories?
I love traveling, yeah. So I loved traveling before I got into documentaries. So when I was younger, I used to go on family holidays, and then I took a gap year before going to university, where I traveled around Latin America for 6-7 months.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was amazing. And I think like that definitely influenced me because, you meet different cultures, different people, you see different ways of life. And I think that really informed me. Yeah.
And is there I'm just again trying to sort of think from our listeners' perspectives. And I know that a lot of our listeners, a lot of our students, they're sort of dedicated to the idea that they want to make fiction films and that, they want to be the next Scorsese or Tarantino or whatever. And I just wonder, did you begin making fiction films? What drew you to the style of a documentary rather than, why did you want to tell real stories rather than fictionalized stories? What was the kind of driving force for you in that?
I'm not sure, to be honest. So when I first began, I made fiction. So my first film was a short documentary, and then I made a couple of short fiction films when I was at film school in Cuba. So I went to film school in Cuba for a year, and there we had workshops in all the different departments: sound, editing, cinematography, directing, etc. And so I made a few fiction films there and documentary. So I to be honest, I didn't really know which way I'd go. I loved both. And then after graduating from university, my sister and I went to India and we made a feature documentary about Hindu nationalism there. So we made it together. And since then, I've just been focusing on documentary, I guess. I think also it's, in a way, as an independent filmmaker, it's easier to do documentary because you just need yourself. If you've got a camera, you don't really need much else. And so it's easier just to go and make films about what you want to make them on. Whereas with fiction, obviously you need a crew and you need a lot of money. So, yeah, I wrote a couple of short fiction films that I would still love to make eventually, maybe one day. But I don't know, documentary, because sometimes also you can't make up real life. Like things happen in real life that you're like, wow, I would have never even thought that would happen. And you get to meet people who otherwise wouldn't normally get to meet. And, you're allowed like such an intimate insight into their life, which I think is really special. Yeah. And I mean, both are great, fiction and documentary.
When you get that, obviously you do get that insight into people's lives because, you're being allowed into someone's space and spending time with them during a time that lots of other people wouldn't get. Do you always try and remain respectful of that? Or do you ever leave the camera rolling slightly longer than you should in the hopes of sharing something, maybe deeper, that maybe they will understand and be grateful that you filmed down the line? I don't know. Do you encounter that line? Is that a moral question that you encounter a lot or not really?
That's a good question. So I think it's really important to be respectful to whoever you're filming, because at the end of the day, you don't want to make a film where the people that you've been filming, they're kind of really angry or distraught or hurt that you've included something about them that they didn't want in the film. So it's really, really important. You've got a responsibility to kind of respect them and their privacy, because they're allowing you into their life to film, whatever.
Yeah.
But so I don't think I have. So maybe sometimes, like, when people are crying on screen, like you feel like, oh no, should I record this? Should I not? Because obviously it's very intimate, but it's so emotional. So often, if they're saying something that's really heartfelt, your natural human instinct is to switch off the camera and go and hug them, or like saying, are you okay? But I think I have learned to kind of keep the camera rolling and not say that, because sometimes those kind of moments can be really, really powerful in a film. But those kind of things, I don't think they wouldn't be kind of really upset at you doing that. But also from behind the camera, you can show empathy rather than saying anything. You can still like kind of show them that you're listening and that you're caring and you're not exploiting them, because it's really important not to obviously have them think that, and for yourself not to do that, because you make documentaries normally about people who you really love and value.
It sounds like obviously there's a lot of skills, human skills of empathy that are required to make a documentary. Obviously, you mentioned as well being interested in maybe making some fiction films as well. I wondered what are the crossover of skills that you think apply to both a fiction director and a documentary director, and maybe which ones maybe that come up a lot more in documentary or the other way around.
Well, I think in both of them, people skills. So, directors are dealing with actors in fiction, and then in documentary, you're creating a really special relationship with your participants. So, communication, being friendly, being empathetic. And then in terms of so I did a master's in cinematography, and I feel like the cinematography in both fiction and documentary are quite similar because, through the way you frame a character, it tells a lot, whether it's, fiction or documentary. Obviously, the differences in equipment and lighting, if you're out on the field, you're not going to take any lights with you. It's kind of run and gun, often just got yourself, the camera, a tripod maybe, and a sound person. In fiction, you've got so many more crew members. But the same kind of story elements in terms of the camera work apply to both. Yeah, and then so the question was more about directors.
Yeah. But obviously with story as well that you mentioned, do you read a lot into story structure? Because there's a lot of story structure theory books and whatnot. Are you trying to identify what, say, the midpoint plot point of your documentary is going to be? Are you trying to hang key events on act breaks, or is it more about just the overall journey?
So, I mean, I don't read too much about the theory of storytelling. I should, to be honest. So maybe I will before I start editing this. But yeah, I think it's important, obviously, to have the arc in all the scenes and then the bigger arc in the film. Yeah. But also that sometimes, you can play with that. So you can learn the rules to break the rules. So you don't always have to adhere to the, 3 acts and 3 act films. And so sometimes it's just a bit more organic. So often when I do edit some short films or mid-length films that I've done, I don't really think of it in a theoretic way. I think of it as I'm doing it. It's more instinctive.
Yeah, trying to create that journey and also experience it as you're piecing it together in a way.
I wanted to ask you, this is just going back a little bit, I apologize, but when you were talking about, your relationship with your subjects or your participants, how do you, especially as an observational documentarian, how do you, ensure that you're not flirting with the line of voyeurism? Where do you feel, especially with something like the nomadic people who are so different from the modern life that we live? What is your process, or do you even think about, has that passed you by because you're so experienced of where you make sure you're not crossing a line of it becoming voyeuristic or somehow taking advantage of these people that you're shooting?
Definitely. So I think it's really important. So I think it's mainly to do with intention. So if you're aware of the different in power, for example, the person with the camera, you're making a film, you have the power essentially. So you've got to be really mindful of that. So with me, I was very careful not to intrude on their lifestyle. I don't want to be a pain for them. So I wanted them to carry on as normal, not to worry about me. And they were really great. They were so natural in front of the camera. They were amazing. If someone put a camera on me, I would freeze up and not know how to act, but they were the opposite. And then I was just, so also I couldn't really understand what they were saying. So, later on, once everything got translated and I've, found out, oh, okay, they're talking about this. I was like, oh, I hope they didn't mind me recording that part of their conversation. But there's also this trust. So you might have footage that they wouldn't, you wouldn't put in the film because out of respect, and you'd want to protect them or showcase them in a certain light. You wouldn't put everything in the actual final film.
That's such a tricky situation, actually. Like, I'm just thinking of trying to, you don't know if they're talking about something important. Like, do you get a look from your translator, them just sort of giving you a wink, just being like, you might want to film this, or like,
exactly.
how does it work?
Like that. So a lot of it was kind of shooting blind. So I would just, because my translator couldn't tell me everything, because if he was talking to me, then it would be captured on the microphone. So I was just told him to tap me when they're saying something really important or something about these themes, which I told him about before. So that's kind of how we did it.
Nice.
But it was very frustrating because, after seeing the footage, I'd be like, oh, well, if I knew they were saying that, I would have filmed this shot and that shot.
Yes, I was going to say, how do you manage the B-roll when you don't know exactly what it is that the subjects are discussing?
Yeah, it's difficult. So I just, so I couldn't, if I spoke their language, I would have filmed it in a far different way, which is more intentional. So this experience really taught me, next time I make a film in a language I can speak. But it was just mainly talking to my interpreter, when the camera was off, and kind of understanding what they were saying more or less, and then filming.
Do you think if you're an interpreter, do you think your interpreter needs to be aware of what the process of filming is? Like, were they interpreter with experience in film and TV, or was it your job to get them up to speed of what you needed from them?
So actually, my interpreter was actually an electrician who I'd met randomly in India on a previous trip. Because the language that the nomadic camel herders speak is very, very niche.
I was going to say, right? That was my guess.
Yeah, like, not many people speak their language and English. So my interpreter, he didn't really know anything about filmmaking, so he learned on the job. So, in fact, I had a different interpreter on the first shoot who was a tour guide, but he wasn't really, I had to change because it wasn't really working out with us. So it was very kind of just learning on the job for Ibrahim, who was my interpreter. And he was great. Like, he was not only an interpreter, he was like a camera assistant and his all-round help.
Sound recordist.
I had a separate sound recordist, but he was, just all-round. He was like a production assistant and everything, yeah.
How many more of you were there? So it was you, the sound recordist, your interpreter, who else was there?
And we had a driver who also turned out to be super helpful, because he was like, he comes from a pastoralist family. So he actually, sometimes we put him in the scenes talking, because he had a really nice relationship with the nomadic family. So sometimes we would have him in there to guide the conversation, to like ask questions about certain things that we wanted to film. So he turned out to be super, super helpful.
Yeah. He could almost have been your alias within the film in a way.
Yeah.
Sort of like staring off into the sunset for the opening shot and stuff. Do you still work with your sister? Because it's both yours production company, right?
Yeah, it is. So we made a couple of films together. And so we don't work really together anymore. So sometimes I do help her with the cinematography and things like that. But so she's 4 years older than me. And sometimes when we work together, she kind of tends to take the lead and I get annoyed. So I was like, I'm going to make my own films from now.
This is going to be my question. How do you navigate working with a family member?
I mean, it's great because we we can be frank with each other and we produce really good things when we work together because, you know, we might argue, but then we come back together, we're sisters, you know, so our bond can never really be broken. So it's nice. We challenge each other and produce good things. But also it's different. So, you know, maybe in the future we would work on other films together. But at the moment, I think, at least for me, I think it's nice for me to kind of do my own thing too.
Yeah. So sort of like, you can support each other whilst also working on your own stuff. And I suppose if either one of your films does well, then that helps both of you because it's under the same banner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Super cool.
And how do your parents feel about two of their daughters being filmmakers?
They're proud, I think.
Okay,
in the beginning, I think, because my sister went into it first, so she had to deal with the kind of disapproval of the parents. And by the time it got to me, they were like, "Oh yeah, sure, it's fine." Yeah. She had to find the battles.
That is a lot of pressure, because you probably had to do like a PowerPoint presentation. I think you'll find that it, could work out pretty good.
It is a viable career.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you some questions that we ask all of the guests who come and join us on the podcast, which is, Sonum, what were you up to when you were a teenager? What did you do as a young person? And how do you feel like any of that fed into what you do now?
Okay, so at school, what did I used to do? So I was actually I was a bit of a tomboy when I was younger. I was into martial arts. And I went to a kind of a very academic school. So I was also kind of focused on my studies. And I don't think I would have never thought I would be a filmmaker. When I was younger, I wanted to be a human rights lawyer and then a diplomat. At one point, I wanted to be a sports teacher. So I think I only really, when I was older, when I was like 18, 19, that filmmaking really entered my mind. So
but even just listening to you, it still sounds like those roots are there, right? You wanted to be a human rights lawyer, and so now you're telling people stories that need to be heard, that are the less fortunate ones, the less known ones. So it seems like those there are links that you can track back.
That's true. Yeah. I think, always like social justice and equality and those values are very important to me as a young person.
And an interest in other cultures, right? Even martial arts, you were studying another culture's traditions. So that has obviously permeated through your life. And I believe I read that did you study Russian and Spanish when you were in university?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I studied Spanish and Russian at uni.
I studied Spanish as well, so here we both are.
Cool.
And what would you, if you could look back on that teenager who is very into her studies, what advice might you give her?
To allow my creative side to flourish, because I think my creative side only flourished really after I left school. So, even we had like even during like art class in my secondary school, like they made it really boring. The teachers made art really boring. I was like, I love painting now, but when I was younger, it was like they took the fun out of it. So I would just encourage myself to just, be myself, not care about what others think of you, and just trust that, your path is fine. Because also, like, teenagers growing up, you always want to belong and you feel like, you should fit into somewhere. But sometimes it's fine. You don't need to fit into anywhere. You can just be yourself, and that's great.
That's lovely.
And also, I think, you're absolutely, and I think your trajectory, like a lot of people that we speak to on the podcast, which is why we love to do this, there isn't any one path someone must take in order to become a creative. And, you studied languages when you're in uni, and obviously we're speaking now, language is a part of filmmaking, but it's not as if you've gone on to just teach people Russian as your career. You've taken everything that you've studied and it's informed your filmmaking, probably in ways you're unconscious of. Have you, when you think back to sort of how you studied or what you thought you wanted to be, do you feel separated from that, or are you able to sort of embrace the multitude?
Definitely. So I think like the more experience you have in life, in education and just lived experience in traveling, everything, that really shapes who you are. And then that shapes what kind of stories you tell and like your perspective. So, you know, at uni studying languages, we did a lot of literature, and then, you know, I did like a film module, some like visual arts, and like you analyze things and you look at how stories are created. So I kind of got that kind of side as well. And then just meeting people through traveling, learning about history. Like now I've got really into podcasts. I'm learning all about empire and colonialism and yeah. So the more you learn about history, politics, how the world works, and also the more experiences you have, in whatever passions like you have, like explore them, and it just shapes who you are, and only adds to the stories that you want to tell.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Sonum, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such a treat. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience in the world of documentary filmmaking. It's been amazing.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
It was terrific to have you. Thank you. Well, I feel really hopeful after talking to her. How do you feel?
Me too. Genuinely, like you can feel her passion for doing right by the world and shining a lens on important matters, like how much that means to her, which I think is really special, you know.
Absolutely. And I think the notion that she sees something in the world that fills a small niche that lots of people aren't even aware of. And she says, that's the story I want to tell. You know, I want to give these people their moment in the sun, I think is such a beautiful thing and a really human thing that I just admire. I think it's just fantastic.
For sure. I can't imagine ending up with 90 hours of footage.
I was watching your editor's brain explode there as you were doing those maths. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where you begin. No wonder she's sort of exploring lots of options in her mind, because
yes,
that's just going to take ages.
Start?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Yeah, and I was sort of interested in the whole sort of film theory angle, because I think my sort of slightly mechanical brain, although I think we've talked about before sort of artists versus poets.
Right.
Well, sorry, no, poets versus engineers and stuff. Although I do think that good artists are both quite simply. So yeah, I think if I was dealing with that much footage, I feel like I'd have to be a bit more of an engineer just to try and filter through it. I don't know.
I have this image of her, though. You know, I have this image that it's like an onion, and that all she has to do is peel back the layers, and she'll find, you know, the core and the heart of what the story is. And then it's just a matter of you know, it's more of an uncovering, a revealing of something than anything else, which is it really, I thought it was so interesting what she said about it's kind of a different way in, you know, in a fiction film, the story is the very first start. It's the starting place, the script, the idea. And for the documentary, you've got an idea, maybe you've got a theme, but the story itself is going to kind of manifest or show itself to you as you go through.
Yeah. Which requires like quite a strong element of faith in a way, you know.
I was just going to say it takes a lot of trust to believe that a story is going to come out. It is an act of faith in that sense. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it would just be more so maybe if you were doing a short documentary, because a short documentary, you know, you probably still want to show some kind of change or movement for your characters. But if you're only filming with a group of people for a few days or a week, what's the chances of something that monumental happening?
Right.
You've almost got to think about that in advance of when you find your subject matter. Like maybe if you're doing a documentary about someone that competes in some kind of bizarre or niche sport or competition, I don't know, longest carrot growing competition. then you've given yourself an opportunity for shape there, because it's building up towards
get to the competition, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But if you are going to discover the story, then I feel like maybe that's more of like a feature approach to doing it.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, I do think, we always say, what's the best way to learn how to make a film? It's to just make a film, get your friends together and make a film. And I also think get your friends together and make a documentary, find something in your town, in your school, even in your house that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Interview your parents just to work on those skills, because, I think it was really great that she talked about, between the two, there are so many skills that are necessary that are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was with Marina Parker talking about being gentle and having the right sensitivity to conduct interviews effectively,
right. Yes.
And I think by picking up the camera and going, try and pay attention to how comfortable your subjects are.
Yes.
And which interviews went well and which ones didn't, and why. What did you do differently each time? How did you let them feel safe and like they were in a safe place that they could share what you want them to share?
Yeah. Ultimately, you just remember everybody's a person, and you want to treat them, just as you would want to be treated, with that kind of respect and delicacy and kindness. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it looks like we've got a question here from a listener. This is a really practical one. Stephen is asking, I want to make a documentary and interview some of my subjects, but I don't have a microphone and I can't afford one. How do I make sure that their voice is louder than mine, and I make sure the camera picks up their voice if I'm shooting on my phone? So what do you think about that, Dan? That's a great question.
Very good question. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's already good that, Stephen's thinking about what the end result is, what he's trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And then that's an easier way to set about trying to tick those boxes and make sure it goes well, rather than retrospectively not have the right questions, and then be like, oh, I didn't think about this, and this.
Yes, and now all my interviews are not usable, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's already identifying the potential issues, so he can try and fix those and rectify them. The main thing is just being as close to your subject matter as possible. Be in a space that hopefully is quiet. So choose the right location to conduct the interviews. Make sure that the phone is nice and close. You could get them to wear headphones, but I think it would look a bit silly. So I would just avoid the headphones. If you want your voice to be quieter, you can make it quieter in post, because I know some documentaries have, it's always the producers are very quiet and they have to be subtitled, which is very common in what you see. I don't think it's the end of the world if you can hear your voice, as long as your voice is not,
overpoweringly loud.
Yeah, and distracting. Yeah. You just certainly don't want it louder than the subjects. So just make sure there's a nice clear gap between when you finish asking a question and they start talking, and then when they stop and when you ask the next question. Don't talk over them. Allow that break to happen, and then it will be really easy to just lower the volume levels in those moments. In
post, yeah. And you could also set up your phone and set up the shot so that it's quite close to the subject, and then you could put yourself, especially if it's going to be a static interview, you could put yourself across the room.
Yeah.
So that as long as you've, made sure the eye line doesn't look too strange, so that the subject of your interview is speaking to you, but you're farther away so that the phone doesn't pick up so much of your volume. That's another option.
Absolutely. Amelia, this has been a real treat today. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Dan. What a lovely conversation. I'm so glad we got the chance to do it.
Excellent. Me too. And I hope to see you on the next one very soon.
Yeah, see you soon.